آمنوا أن تخشع قلوبهم لذكر الله وما نزل من الحق ولا يكونوا كالذين أوتوا الكتاب من قبل فطال عليهم الأمد فقست قلوبهم وكثير منهم فاسقون.
Retreat to the cave. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear sister, and welcome back to our series, Soul on a Mission. Inshallah ta'ala, if you've been following along with the series, you are clear now on the fact that you are a soul on a mission, and that the Quran is your mission manual, and that we each have a specific calling. It's the same calling that speaks to our fitrah and is hardwired within our very soul, which is the calling to ibadah. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Dhariyat, مَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created the jinn nor the mankind except to worship me alone. And as I shared in the last video, you were literally built for this. You were built for this purpose. And your soul affirmed this when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked all of us, took us out the backs of our father Adam, and asked us, Alastu bi rabbikum? Am I not your Lord? And we responded, Bala shahidna. Yes, we affirm. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took a covenant with our souls before we even came to this earth. And that is hardwired into our fitrah, into our soul, and into what we strive for every day, inshallah ta'ala. So you're clear on that. But you may be asking yourself, how do I reinforce that inner guidance? How do I make sure that I'm tuned into that calling on a regular basis? That I'm setting up routines and structures to support me in affirming that original witnessing? And to that I say, retreat to the cave. And here's what I mean by that. In the blessed month of Ramadan, we willingly pull ourselves away from anything that distracts us from the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? We purposely set aside time for ibadah. We literally plan our day and night in a way that supports us being in a state of purity and really supports us in working to bring forth the best from our nafs and to connect to and really live out that calling. And it's a beautiful thing. We all bask in that time and benefit from that time, and we're sad when it goes. But what if we made that a permanent lifestyle? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, the goal of Ramadan is لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ, so that you can become of those who have taqwa, right? Those who are God conscious. But this is not the goal only in Ramadan. This is the goal for the entire year and our entire lifetime, to be people who are conscious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and who live out our lives in that way. Ramadan is just a refresher, it's a wake-up call, it's a rejuvenator, and it's a training ground where we gain valuable tools that we're meant to implement throughout the year and throughout our lives. And a large part of developing and maintaining taqwa is to pull away from the hustle and bustle of life on a regular basis, not just in Ramadan, but to put yourself in a position where you can contemplate, where you can tune into the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, where you can listen into your own soul whispers and your own conscience and your inner voice, where you can engage in introspection and reflection and self-accountability, where you can plan and set goals, where you can make beneficial dua. This requires you having some inner peace and inner focus, which is why I say we need to learn to retreat to the cave. Otherwise, you're just running on a hamster wheel. And we know what that feels like, right? Not really engaging with our calling in an intentional way. And we're wondering why we don't feel spiritually fulfilled and things aren't changing for the better in our lives. But we're not taking the time to consciously focus on the thing that will make all the difference. And you find that most people and most of the things that we do end up paying so much attention to and giving so much time to, those can become the biggest reasons for fitna and heartache and stress in our lives when we're giving more attention to those things at the expense of our spiritual connection, right? Because you're serving from an empty spiritual cup. And when you do that, not only are you depleting yourself further, but you're not giving your best and you're not interacting in the best way, not in the way sometimes that you will be the most proud of. Again, when we hand those deeds or we stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with those deeds that we will on the day of judgment. And when I say retreat to the cave, I'm speaking about finding or developing a safe space and developing a consistent routine in which you can disconnect from the dunya, reconnect spiritually, release, listen, pray, cry, receive guidance, gain strength, plan, like all of which is critical for the soul who truly is on a mission, right? You have to re up, you have to rejuvenate, you have to re energize physically and also spiritually. So, someone who is seeking to move through this world with intention, right, and with the focus on akhirah, right, and also especially if you're someone who desires to leave an imprint on this world for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, serving His creation in order to serve Him. This is a space where you speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and allow Him to speak to you. You receive that. You really immerse yourself in the Quran and you connect more deeply to His words, you reflect and you ponder and you understand what they are guiding you to. This is a space where you learn, where you're fortified, where you're shown things that you could never get out there because those are the things that are planted and grown in here, right? We can't get it out there. And if you think about any prophet or messenger, any great scholar or teacher, or just any individual who has done amazing things, who has made a mark in some way, they all had time, they all took time, they all protected their time for reflection and connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like that was a critical foundation of their success, of their genius, of their ability to be, prolific in their fields. They had to disconnect at times. They had to disconnect, go within, connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and in that way they had spiritual fuel to do the great things that they did. And that was their strength, it was their sustenance, it was their secret weapon. And subhanAllah, I always remember when Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, the great scholar Ibn Taymiyyah, was asked about his morning routine, about why he stayed in the masjid after Fajr and he would just stay there doing dhikr till about mid-morning. And he said, when he was asked why did he do this so religiously, he said, "Hada ghadai." This is my sustenance. This is my nutrients. Like without this, I'm decrepit. And subhanAllah, like I felt that personally with my morning routine. If something happens or I miss it, which is rarely, and I'm not able to really engage in the same way, like my day is off. It just something is not right because it's such a fundamental and such an important piece. Just having that time and that space to connect to no one but your Lord. Okay? So we need to make sure that we're getting our nutrients, our spiritual nutrients. And we know from our history in Islam that the cave, right? When I say like retreat to the cave has both a practical and a symbolic meaning in Islam, right? There's stories of literally, people retreating to the cave, the Prophet ﷺ, to contemplate Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. right? There's people retreating to the cave to, take refuge from harm, right? And then there's the spiritual cave that you can create within yourself, within your own soul, and also within your normal environment, within your home. And the idea is one of seclusion, of retreat, of refuge, and of reconnection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a regular, consistent basis. So if you think about this idea of the cave, of course, we think first and foremost of the Prophet ﷺ. And when he was going up to that cave, right? When he was going up to that cave on Jabal Nur, the cave of Hira, he had no clue that he was going to become a prophet, right? But he was feeling questions stirring in his soul. He was feeling a need to just quiet the noise. And he knew that he couldn't get what he was seeking, what he was yearning for in the hustle and bustle of Mecca, right? He had to pull away. So he retreated to the cave, to the seclusion. And that's where he was granted prophethood, subhanAllah. Also, think about Maryam alayhi salam, right? Think about the devotion of Maryam, who was constantly found in her mihrab, her prayer area, and found in communion with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the point where she was miraculously provided for. She had fruit appearing that was out of season. She had the fruit from the summer and the winter, and the fruit from the winter and the summer, subhanAllah, to the point where when Zachariah, her uncle, when he came to check up on her, and see about her welfare, he's like, where does this come from? Yeah, Maryam, like, where is this coming from? And her response, Hada min indillah. This is from my Lord. Like she wasn't even phased. This is from my Lord. He provides for me, right? She had no worry about her sustenance, something that we worry about day and night. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provided for her because she was connected to him in such a way that like the path was clear, subhanAllah. And she was blessed then with the immaculate birth of Prophet Isa alayhi salam, right? And they both would be amongst those who will be spoken about, till Yom Qiyamah. And she is one of the four women who reached perfection. She had her cave. She had her cave. You can also think about Prophet Zechariah alayhi salam, who would also devote himself in prayer in a special place in his quarters. He had his own mihrab. And one day after witnessing what he witnessed from Maryam alayhi salam and how Allah provided for her, he went and made ardent dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be provided with an heir, right? Someone who would continue his legacy for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he was granted a son in Yahya alayhi salam, even though both he and his wife were very old. Subhanallah. If you just think about this, all of them had a special space and a special practice, right? A routine where they took time away from the world and they connected only to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as a result, He subhanahu wa ta'ala not only cared for them, but He worked miracles in their lives. And He can do the same for you as well, my dear sister. And this is not just a case where, you have to spend endless hours or your entire life, in your spiritual cave. And this is not something that we just do, in times of ease. You can cultivate this connection with a simple morning or evening routine, right? Or something around the daily silhouette. Or even on your commute, the whole point is to have a focused, specific, exclusive time, and even sometimes multiple times throughout the day for your Lord, only for Him, right? Only for Him. And in addition to your ongoing routine, you have to know when you need to pull back because there's sometimes where things are getting overwhelming, or sometimes where we need some extra guidance and support, or we feel like maybe we're stretching ourselves too thin, or we're starting to not respond to things in the best way, or someone in our life is just like things are tumultuous. So you need to know when you need to pull back, when you're feeling spiritually depleted, when you need extra guidance, and you need to make that time to again retreat to that cave, that sacred space, to refuel by Allah's permission. So you need to make space to refuel by Allah's permission with what you need to maintain your spiritual connection. And if we were created for ibadah, right? Your very soul was taken out of the back of your father Adam, and you took a covenant to that effect, then this is literally the most important thing you can do. The most important thing you can do and maintain, it is literally your lifeblood, right? Our salat and this time for spiritual connection, right? It is your source of light in this dark world. And we, subhanAllah, we so need it in this day and age. Because just like in the time of Ashab al-Kahf, right? The people of the cave, we are in times where we're surrounded by people and things and situations that are calling to other than the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by word and by action, right? Everything around us is calling us to other than that deep spiritual connection that our soul truly craves. We're surrounded by a society where everything wrong has been made right, and to practice what's right is looked at as strange and abnormal, subhanAllah. And in this type of environment, like you must have a place of refuge. Like you won't survive if you don't. You must have a practice of connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will not survive. People think they're walking around surviving. They think that they're going about business as usual, but our hearts are dying, our souls are dying. And we have to make the time and prioritize their rejuvenation and their protection if we truly want to be successful in this world and the next. And when it comes to the people of the cave, they literally sought out a physical cave to escape from the fitna. But for us, it's more about having a space and a practice that allows you to tap in, to hear the call regularly and uninterrupted, that allows you again to seek guidance and ask for support, and a space to really get your ibadah reps in, right? Get your ibadah reps in so that you can maintain your spiritual strength, right? If you don't use it, just like your muscles, you'll lose it. And this is a space to run to, a space to run to and to call on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for guidance, for help, for protection from trials, and also to seek repentance as we often fall into error. So, my dear sister, how might you develop your own mihrab, your own cave, right, in the spaces that you inhabit, which can be as simple as a special corner, in your room, or you may have a dedicated area that you can really fortify and make that special space, right? So, how can you create your own cave or your own spiritual sanctuary? I would love to hear it in the comments, inshallah ta'ala. Now, you don't have to travel to a physical cave, of course, or devote your entire life to secluding yourself into the masjid and just remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala there. But again, how can you in your daily life become more of a qanit? A qanit or qanita for women is translated as one who is devoutly obedient, one who is dedicated to and turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in love and in worship, literally someone who is dedicated to their Lord. This is someone whose love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and their desire to please Him consistently turns them back to Allah, has them deeply reflecting on His signs within creation, His attributes, and just the rahmah of their Lord, and it increases them in connection and love and wanting to be closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And returning all of their affairs to Him and seeking aid only from Him. And it's important to note that this is qanit with a ta, not a ta, not qanit, okay? Because a qanita is actually the opposite meaning, and it's actually really interesting. It with a ta, the definition is to be in despair, right? Someone who's in despair, which is really interesting because not having that spiritual connection, not having a means to reach out to and connect and communicate with your Lord, not having that reliance upon Him, literally does lead to internal misery. and is why so many of the world people literally are carrying around a sense of internal dread and internal misery because they do not have that. Okay, so it's qarnit with a ta at the end. And that's what we're seeking to do, inshallah, to become. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described two people in the Quran as being qaniteen lillah, right? Maryam alayhi salam and Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. Okay? And you know how beloved both of them were to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because they truly made their hearts His. They made their lives His. They made their souls His. By action, they were already His. But by their actions, they proved and affirmed their original covenant, right? They approved and affirmed their original witnessing. And they answered the call to such a magnitude that they're written in history and remembered as the epitome of righteousness by all of mankind, Muslim and non Muslim alike. Literally, Muslim and non Muslim alike, everyone recognizes the lofty station and the righteousness of Maryam alayhi salam and Ibrahim alayhi salam. They were a true representation of the ayah in Surah An'am where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after speaking of His mercy to the believers on the day of judgment and ordering the Prophet ﷺ to say to the disbelievers that he had been guided to the correct path, the path of Ibrahim alayhi salam, He is commanded as such. Allah Azza wa Jal says, say, indeed, my prayer and my sacrifice, my living and my dying, are for Allah, Lord of the worlds. Again, say, indeed, my prayer and my sacrifice, my living and my dying, are for Allah, Lord of the worlds. And that's our goal, my dear sister. So, how do we work towards that? You want to think about in your time alone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what you want to guard fiercely, right? Your salat time, your time that you put aside for reflection and review and reading of Quran. In your time alone with Him, open that manual more, right? Open that Quran more. Really dive into it. Start to allow it, like we said before, to speak to you, to read you. And in your salat, right? Ask for guidance. Ask Allah to guide you to the straight path. If you think about this, we ask Ihdina Sirat Mustaqim, right? Allah guide us to the straight path 17 times a day. Say that with intention, say it with meaning, with the expectation that you will be guided. Okay? Also, purify your environment and your ibadah. Ensure that your environment is clean, that it's refreshed, that it's hospitable, that it is inviting to the angels, right? And then also purify your ibadah. Ensure that your ibadah is done correctly, that you're going through, that you understand what you should be doing, that you're doing things in the proper way, that you're trying to remove distractions, and that you're truly focused in that communication with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you want to remove distractions that can keep you away from Him, that can keep that connection from forming. And you want to develop a routine and work to build a personal relationship with your Lord. Now, when you do this, you'll start to change internally and externally. You'll find a greater sense of peace and a greater sense of direction. And your likes and your dislikes will start to change as well. The type of conversations and environments that you want to be in will shift, right? Because you'll become someone who is being nourished upon light, right? And when you're nourished upon the light of Allah, your soul wants to be around light, and it is repelled by environments that do not support that or do not contribute to that light, right? Your soul will feel unease with anything less. And this can sometimes be a cause for feelings of loneliness because it can be the case that sometimes the people around you may not be on the same path. And I always remind my students and myself of the phrase which I teach, which is seekers often walk alone. Again, seekers often walk alone. Think about the examples that I mentioned with Maryam alayhi salam, the Prophet sallallahu like they had to retreat and sometimes go through things on their own in order to really live up to the magnitude of their calling, of their mission. But know that no matter how lonely you feel, you are never alone when you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Never. When you're moving in His obedience, when you're following His guidance, when you're striving to be in His service, you are never, never alone. And also, when you persevere on the path, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will send you other striving souls to accompany you on the journey because we're all going the same way. And it may not be many, it could be a few, but it's just the right ones. And subhanAllah, I've found this in the groups and the classes that I lead, that one of my greatest joys is to bring like-minded striving sisters together to bond and to support each other on the journey. Because we truly become soul sisters, alhamdulillah, as we aid each other in striving towards the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there can be an element of loneliness, but you just have to find your soul tribe. And if, like many of us, you've had relationships in your life that have caused you pain, if you've dealt with betrayal or oppression, know that the relationship that you build with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one that you're building with the one who will never betray you, will never oppress you, will never be unfair to you, the one who is more merciful and more loving than 70 mothers, subhanallah, and only wants good for you, ultimately wants the best for you, so that on Yom Kippur, he can finally welcome you back home. Like, that's the goal, that he can finally welcome you back home because of your striving and your seeking his pleasure. And this is what our soul is truly yearning for. This is what our soul is truly yearning for, that welcome. And that's what we should be striving for in this life. But the question is, are you willing to forego some of the comforts and some of the ease of this worldly life for the ultimate reward in the hereafter? The reward that never ends. خَالِدِينَ فِيهَا أَبَدًا. They will reside therein in Jannah, inshallah, forever. Will you answer the call? Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن تنصروا الله ينصركم ويثبت أقدامكم قد أفلح من زكاها